Hello and welcome to yet another stream where I learn PHP database with you, or you learn PHP database with me, or both of us learn it together with Jeffrey. All right, so Jeffrey Way is teaching. I think he has one of the best courses for PHP on the internet. It's for free. I've linked it in the description. It's on laracast.com, PHP for beginners. You don't need to sign up or whatever. And he's also posted it on YouTube. So both of those links are in the description. Please check it out. And if you'd like to follow along with me. So a quick recap of the last episode. We built what do you call it? A PDO object. So a PDO object is essentially PHP database. I don't know what O stands for, organizer, I guess. I don't know what it is. What we did was essentially created SQL queries from PHP. So we connected this application to MySQL, said select everything from the posts table, and then executed that statement, fetched that statement. We got an array with different associations. So one was an associative array and the other one was a numbered array. We said just give us the associative array, and stored it as posts, and then looped over each post to create this. So there were two entries in the database. That's a quick recap of what we did in the previous episode. Now let's look at extracting a PHP database class, and I swear I have no idea what any of those. I mean, I know what those words mean, but I don't know what those words mean together. Let's find out.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Here's where we left off in the last episode. So we created this awkward looking connection string, and then we passed it to a new PDO instance. And then we prepared and executed our first query. We fetched all of the results as an
Pause. He said PDO instance, so that means instance, a new object from the PDO class. So that's what it's called, making a new instance of a class. So this is a new object of PDO. That's what it means.
Associative array. And then we looped over the posts, and for each one we displayed the title of the post within a list item. And here's what we get. Okay, so to be honest, there is so much we have to cover. We need to talk about prepared statements and SQL injection and different ways that we can configure the DSN. But before we get there, let's just take a few moments and refactor this into something that's a little more friendly to use. Okay, so here's what I'm thinking. If I were to, at the top, make a little note about what we're trying to do here.
Pause. I love how Jeffrey identifies problems which I didn't even know existed, but when he does, I said, hey, he's right, this is very clunky and not friendly to use. There's probably a more elegant way to do this. Let's see what that is.
I could do that with 2 forward slashes, and now I can enter any text, and this won't be interpreted as PHP. It's just a comment. Anyways, if I were to write this out, I sort of want to connect to the database and execute a query. Okay, so why don't we convert this to a class? And we already learned a little bit about classes in the last episode, but we'll learn a little more in this video. We learned that we can create a class like so. And I did say connect to the database. And at least initially, it's helpful to follow the nouns. So why don't we start with that, class database. All right, next up we have and execute a query. Yeah, in this example, execute.
Wait, what? So you can create a class out of a class? What this probably means is the PDO object would be instantiated inside the database class. Let's see if that's true.
And query would both be pretty good method names because they can both be treated as verbs. And remember, we learned that methods are the verbs of the programming world. So in this case, let's just pick one. Do we want to call execute or query? And this is where the design aspect comes into play. If I'm working with a database class and I want to trigger a SQL query, do I want to call execute or do I want to call query? In this case, I think I'll go with query, public function query. And yeah, remember, whenever we define a function within a class, technically we would call it a method. And don't forget to add the visibility. But yeah, right now we're making everything public because we haven't yet dug into that. All right, so this is looking pretty good to start. The next step is to create a new instance of the database class. So I will begin by creating a variable, db is very common, equals a new instance of the database class. Okay, so now I can call this query method by saying db arrow query. And yeah, you'll know you did it right because if you're using a good IDE, it will give you some IntelliSense. And you can see, yep, you can call this method. Okay, so now how would we go about refactoring all of this into our new database class? And you know what? We're going to do it one refactor at a time. So we will begin by selecting everything, cutting it, and pasting it into our query method. Okay, so now when I call this query method, yeah, it builds up the DSN, it initializes PDO, it prepares a hard-coded query, which doesn't really make sense. What if I want to run a different query? Well, we'll get there.
Yeah.
Then we execute it, and then we fetch the results, and we save it to a variable called posts. But yeah, if we wanted, we could return that. And now we should have an array of posts if we did everything correctly. So let's try this out. Posts equals db query. Come back to Firefox, give it a refresh, and yeah, it still works.
Okay, let's go. Let's try this. Let's try this. Let's jump ahead just a little bit and try to. I've done this. I'm gonna define a new class. So how do you do that? Class database public function URI query takes in something and does this. Okay, let's say it takes in the Q query, and this is Q. Does that work? And instead of doing this, give me a return. So return this. All right. Then posts is a new database. Actually, no. DB. Right. Is a new database. Then I just clicked on clicked Control S. I just did Control S so that it saves. There's lots of white space here. I'm going to remove that. I don't know if we need it. Okay. Then let's say posts is db query select star from posts, right? Okay, let's try. Yeah, it still works. It still works. It still works. It still works. Let's go. Let's go. Cool. So understood what is happening. I just basically changed this hard-coded, what do you call it? SQL query string to a variable called Q, because I didn't want to confuse query for query. So there's two things called query. For the function's called query and the argument or the parameter is also called query. So I didn't do that. I could ideally like to be more clear. QUERI string query string. That's a little bit more clear. Okay, let's see how Jeffrey does it.
So it's not very flexible because right now I have a database class with a query method, and all that query method does is it selects everything from the post table, which of course you don't want. So yeah, that would be the next step. Let's make this query dynamic by turning it into a variable. And we can accept that when we call the method.
Yeah, I did the same thing, just that I call the argument query string instead of query, because the function is also called query. I just wanted to be extra clear.
Okay, so now if I scroll down, you'll see squigglies here because we are requiring that you pass us a query. So I will paste that in now. And yeah, notice I've moved it out of the method and made it just a little more flexible. So notice I can tweak this if I need to. For example, select star from post where ID is greater than 1. And in this case, I think I only have one record. So if I come back, yeah, notice I have complete control. If I had a different table, well, I could say select star from users. Again, I've made it that much more dynamic. But now, if we scroll up, it works, but it's a little unfortunate because, as you can imagine, in a real-life application, you could potentially execute hundreds of queries as the user browses around your site. And it's a shame that every time you call this query method, we basically start over from scratch. It doesn't really make sense. Instead, it would be nice if I could build up our PDO instance one time, and then every time we call query, we effectively reuse that same instance. And as it turns out, of course, we can do that. Okay, so where would that code go? And as it turns out, when we initialize a new instance of a class, there's a way to say, okay, right when that instance is created, I want you to do something. And here's how we do that in PHP. We create a function, and it's very awkwardly named. It's underscore underscore construct. So when an instance is constructed, that's how I think of it. But yeah, remember, 2 underscores and then construct. So yeah, if I wanted to, I could say, hi there, just to prove to you that we are triggering this method automatically. So if I come back to Firefox and give it a refresh, sure enough, that function or that method has been called by PHP automatically. Okay, so it sounds like that's the perfect place to initialize our PDO instance.
Pause. I want to see if the method is called automatically by PHP or because we created a new instance of a database. I want to see that. Public function construct. I'm gonna dd auto called. Let's see. So how I know that is if I comment this out and comment this out. Let's see. It's not auto called right now, but when I create a new instance, maybe it is. Yeah, it is auto called. Okay, so it's only auto called when, obviously it makes sense, when I am creating a new object from the class. Fun. So he'll probably have us move these things over. I don't know, my control X wasn't working. And I'm gonna paste this here. Why are you yelling at me? What's wrong? Okay, let's see. Something's wrong. Oh, I'm doing that twice. Is that true? Yeah, I am. I'm defining the same variable twice. That's why PHP is yelling at me. See, I defined TSN and PDO twice. Now if I save, I still have an error. Oh, I deleted the name of this thing, that's why. Public function construct. Yeah, that should fix it. So instead of this, I think it should be this PDO. What? Okay, let's it'll be this as in dollar this. It's not? Yeah, dollar this PDO, not dollar PDO. Let's see if that works. Doesn't. Okay, let's wait for Jeffrey to teach us.
So I will grab this and move it up here. Okay, but now notice in our query method, we have an issue. We expected to have access to that PDO variable, but it's in a different scope now. We moved it out of this method. Okay, so here's what we can do. Right up in the construct, let's define a instance property. And again, right now we're making everything public, but later I'll teach you when it would make sense to not make things public. All right, and what should we call this? Well, we could do PDO like we have here, but really it's sort of our database connection. That's how I think of it. So why don't we call it connection? Okay, so now I have an instance property on our class called connection. Now I want to write to it. So instead of creating this variable PDO, I will instead say $this for this instance, arrow, connection equals new PDO.
Makes sense.
And then stylistically, I would probably put a blank line above it. Okay, so now think about it. Whenever I create a new instance of database, well, we automatically call this construct method, as we learned. Within it, we initialize a new PDO instance, and we assign it to this connection instance property. And yeah, by the way, that's generally the term we use, property. Okay, and what's cool about that?
So you call a variable inside a class an instance property. Makes sense. I'll take notes here. Let's continue.
Is anywhere else in this class I can access that property. So now if I want to use my connection, I can replace this with this connection. And on the connection, we will call prepare. So what we have here should work just fine. Let's give it a shot.
Okay, it makes complete sense. So let's create an instance property here. Public declare connection. Then instead of PDO, call it this connection. And instead of PDO, it's actually connection. Still should work. Just to prove my point, where ID is greater than 1. Okay. So it works. Fantastic.
Come back to Firefox, give it a refresh, and yeah, I once again get all of the posts that have an ID greater than 1. Let's remove that and try it again, and now we have all of the posts in the database, which is only 2.
Yeah, both of them.
Cool. Okay, so what we have here actually looks fairly good, but we have one issue. Right here, I don't love this, and here's why. What if I were instead trying to fetch a single post? Well, I might say, select star from post where the ID equals 1, and I will just die and dump that post. Well, it'll work if I come back and give it a refresh, but notice it's effectively returning a collection, a list. So I have an array of arrays, which means I would have to do something like this. Give me the first item from that array.
Sorry, I'll increase the quality.
And that would give me this, and that 2 is an array. So I would then say, then give me the title, and that works. But notice it's kind of weird. I would expect a single array that has all of the attributes of my post. But because we called fetch all, that's going to return to us a list. So the solution is to not call fetch all, but instead just fetch. Give me 1 record. Come back and refresh. Yeah, so now notice I have a single level array here, and I can once again do things like post, title, and that'll work. Okay, so once again, we're seeing that whether we call fetch or fetch all or maybe something else, well, that needs to be dynamic. So instead, why don't we just return the statement itself? And yeah, at least for now, I can be in charge down here of whether we call fetch or fetch all. So in this case, I want a single record, so I could call fetch, and then once again, PDO fetch association. And notice this right here is kind of annoying. It would be nice if we didn't have to manually write that every single time we fetch the results. And trust me, you can. We'll do that in the next video. So if I come back and refresh, there we go. And yeah, if we later decide, no, I actually wanted all of the posts, then I could switch over to fetch all. And oh yeah, of course, we have to update this. Now I have all of the posts, which is an array of arrays. And sure enough, that works. All right, and I will wrap up this lesson by creating a new database.
Got it. Got it. Okay, so instead I'm just returning the statement and essentially letting the object decide whether I want to fetch all or fetch. Correct? Yeah, I think that's what I'm doing. Yeah, makes sense. Does this still work? Yeah, of course it should work. Yep, it does. So he's going to create a new database.php file. Let's say database.php. I saw him use capital D. Let's see.
I have all of the posts, which is an array of arrays. And sure enough, that works. All right, and I will wrap up this lesson by creating a new database.php file. And I will grab all of this here and move it. And we'll paste it right here. Okay, cool. So now, if I switch back, we can require database.php. And actually notice that I made that D capital. And that's because whenever you have a PHP file that only contains a class, and you're going to do this all the time in the future, by the way. Again, general conventions state that it should be capital. Okay, so granted, we still have so much more work to do, but already things are starting to look, and more importantly, feel pretty good, I think. So yeah, stay tuned for the next episode, and we'll keep chipping away at it.
Thank you so much. Okay, let's do this. That was helpful to know. So I'm going to rename this to D capital. This is not a file that contains PHP functions. Instead, it like this one. Instead, it contains the definition of the database class. Therefore, I'm going to cut all of this and cut this. Yeah. Control X, paste it in the database file after I say this is PHP. And in index, I'm going to require that. Database.php and oh god. Okay, this should work. I have commented out the router because otherwise it'll just take us to the beautiful website that we created. Instead, we're working with database right now. So I have chosen to keep this up over here. So I'm gonna minimize these. Quick summary. So what happened in this video is we extracted a lot of the logic into a new class called database. Again, classes are the nouns of the programming world. And we instantiated that class. So DB is an instance of the database class. So this DB is an object that's created based on the blueprint of database. Database is defined over here. It has a what was it called? Instance. What was it called? Let me check my notes. Instance property. Yeah. So it has an instance property called connection, which is essentially a variable declared inside a database definition, inside a class definition, excuse me. So this is the instance property. Then it has an auto loading function, which is the __ construct. This function runs every time this is instantiated. You don't need to call query. You don't need to call. So I'll give you an example. So over here we needed to do database query and call that function, call that method, but we didn't need to do that over here because this is only run every time a value is assigned, an object is assigned to this blueprint, to this class, or instantiated rather from this class. So what that did is it created a connection which was a PDO object, which was a PDO object. So from the class PDO, it created a connection, and that connection was used by this query method, wherein the connection would prepare a SQL query and then execute the same query and then return what was the result from the after being executed. Whew. Love this so much. Thank you so much for watching, and again, go to laracast.com, take this free course. It's easily one of the best courses I've seen on PHP. If you'd like to stick to YouTube and watch this course on YouTube for free, again, both of the links are in the description. Thank you to Jeffrey Way and Laracast for creating this. And is there homework? Is there homework? No, there doesn't seem to be any homework. Thank you for watching. You have a wonderful rest of your day. All right, take care. Bye.